Final session on with kind of the state level organization focus is on newborn screening, which I think, as most of you know, is a states' rights issue. And we're going to hear several different perspectives on that. And then, again, if you can hold your questions, we'll have some discussion at the end. Hashtag WRDD 2014.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and definitely thrilled that newborn screening is part of your agenda today. This has been a priority for the March of Dimes for a number of years, so we're happy that you have an interest and will learn more about it. Just a quick promo on the March of Dimes. We're a collaboration of over 3 million volunteers. We kind of have a broad spectrum of volunteers, from business leaders to health professionals to families, chapters in every state. We really focus our mission in 4 different areas: research, education, that's provider and consumer education, community programs, and advocacy. And we just celebrated our 75th anniversary this past year. Is everyone familiar with newborn screening? This is just kind of quickly, it's the heel prick that a newborn receives before they leave the hospital. It's also now a few functional tests like hearing screening and congenital heart disease screening. So why is this a priority for the March of Dimes? We actually started back with funding, or at least assisting with funding for Dr. Robert Guthrie to develop the first newborn screening test for PKU. So we started with that research funding back in the 60s and have kind of from there through the 70s and 80s funded research that led to the development of screening for congenital adrenal hyperplasia, biotinidase deficiency. So we have a track record on the research side, but it wasn't until really the late 90s, early 2000s, we started seeing the real proliferation of newborn screening tests and kind of a patchwork of what states were screening for. I think that's the other kind of key piece of newborn screening, is that these are all state-run programs. Each state decides what conditions they'll screen for at birth. So this disparity really was identified by our board, and we started a nationwide advocacy campaign to ensure that every state and territory required that infants are screened for at least a core set of conditions that met a certain criteria, and that criteria is that the screening has a documented medical benefit to the affected infant from early detection and treatment, that there's a reliable screening test, and that early detection can be made from either a blood spot or another specific means. So we began tracking newborn screening in 2004 with an annual report card and map. So this is the 2004 map, and you can see that at this point, only 21 states were screening for 9 or more conditions, and the 9 conditions at that point was sort of the first core recommended panel. Just 4 years later, in 2008, we had 48 states testing for at least 21 conditions, and half were testing for at that point, the full recommended panel of 29 conditions. We stopped doing the maps, I think, in 2009, but just to give you a sense, so today, by our count, 42 states and the District of Columbia are requiring screening for at least 29 of what's now the 31 treatable conditions that are part of the panel. So that's tremendous success. And this was, obviously, given the March of Dimes perspective, this was a group, many groups, families from across the nation that took part in this campaign. But it wasn't just a state-by-state effort. There's also a federal component to this, and that continues to be very important. So going back kind of the late 90s, the same time we saw this real disparity at the state level, we also began working with Congress to identify some policy areas that the federal government could address. And really two key areas we identified were states needed guidance on what conditions to screen for, and they needed technical assistance and financial assistance to run their state newborn screening programs. So provisions were included in the Children's Health Act of 2000 that addressed both of these issues. That bill created the Secretary's Advisory Committee on Heritable Disorders in Newborns and Children, and also a grant program out of the Health Resources and Services Administration. So you saw, again, the 2008 map, we had made significant progress, and that really led to an opening for Congress, along with a lot of lobbying, to have a comprehensive newborn screening bill. And so that was the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act of 2000. It really put into law all the newborn screening related activities across the Department of Health and Human Services. It really formally established a role for the federal government to play in newborn screening. It also renewed the Advisory Committee on Heritable Disorders and formally directed that advisory committee to establish a recommended uniform screening panel, which we call the RUSP. So that, and just, I think Natasha will get into more detail on the advisory committee, but the RUSP just is, the advisory committee makes a recommendation to the secretary, and then the secretary of HHS actually decides what is on that recommended uniform screening panel. So with all, or most legislation, it does run out. We are now up for our 5-year renewal for the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act, and we have a reauthorization bill currently pending in Congress. Representatives Roybal Allard and Simpson introduced the House version, and the Senate version was introduced by Senators Kay Hagan and Orrin Hatch, and actually was moved extremely quickly and passed the Senate just at the end of January and has been sent over to the House. We're hopeful that the House will take up the bill. It looks like the House is going to make a few changes to the bill that the Senate passed, but we're hoping they'll take that up in the next month or so. I'll just quickly go through a few of the provisions because I think it does give kind of a good quick overview of what the federal activities are related to newborn screening. So again, the bill would reauthorize and extend the advisory committee for another 5 years. It does create a new timeline or deadline for the advisory committee where the committee would have to review a condition and make a recommendation to the secretary within 10 months of a condition being nominated. So really trying to accelerate that timing for review to get it to the secretary. And then there's also some deadlines around how long the secretary has to respond to that. So really trying to accelerate the time where we can get conditions onto the panel and start working at the state level on implementation. So it renews the federal grant programs that provide assistance to states. This includes, for instance, HRSA currently does a congenital heart disease demonstration program. So again, this was a condition added to the panel just a few years ago. A lot of states are working on implementing that, but need assistance, just technical assistance, mainly because it's a new type of test. It's not done with the blood spot. So that's one area. Another area, which I know Natasha will talk in more detail about, is Baby's First Test and the consumer education grants that HRSA is doing. And then also the technical assistance grants done for state newborn screening programs, more on the quality improvement side, and that's called the New Steps program. And then quickly, just two other areas that it does reauthorize: the Newborn Screening Quality Assurance Program. This is lab testing quality assurance. done out of CDC, so this really is making sure that the accuracy of the laboratory tests are as good as possible. And then finally, it does reauthorize and maintain the Hunter Kelly Research Program, which is the National Institutes of Health research related to newborn screening, both on the technology side and in terms of finding treatments for conditions. So all of these programs are currently up and running, are funded. We get the question a lot, well, why do we need to reauthorize this program? And really, number one, it's going to ensure that the advisory committee continues to operate for another 5 years and that they continue to maintain and update the recommended uniform screening panel. It also really helps us driving funding to newborn screening activities. It allows us to build more champions in Congress and support funding. And it does show, the flip side of that, it does show the federal agencies that this is a congressional priority. With the way funding bills currently are working now, agencies are getting more discretion at certain times to use their funding, and so showing that this is a congressional priority is really important. So this is the current funding levels, just to give you some perspective on the federal commitment. So the HRSA Heritable Disorders Program, so the advisory committee, the assistance to states is right about $12 million. The quality assurance for labs is about $7 million per year, and they also are doing, out of that same group, some implementation help for states with SCID, which was another condition recently added to the panel. And then the NIH newborn screening research portfolio is a little harder to get a specific number on, but we have an estimate of about $13 million that NIH is spending on research, and that was from the previous fiscal year. So I would just say thank you for having me today, and if there are any individuals or groups that are interested in joining the federal lobbying effort, please contact me. We have a good group, a good coalition of organizations that are working to reauthorize the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act and also drive funding each year. So we would love to have you join us in that. Thank you.
Two numbers to keep track of: Senate Bill 1417. That was the reference for the Newborn Screening Saves Lives. No matter what your issue is tomorrow when you're on Capitol Hill, if you're in a senator's office, thank them for passing that. And it was H.R. 1281 that the House needs to still work on. So write that on your paper. No matter what your issue is tomorrow, you want to slip that in somewhere. If you're interested in talking about the Secretary's Advisories Committee requirements for a newborn screen, one particular issue, which I'm sure you'll bounce around on a little bit, but I'm trying to pioneer an effort to discuss whether a viable therapy is a requirement for a newborn screen. And I want to bring stakeholders to the table and just talk about it. You could maybe guess what maybe my opinion is and other people's opinions, but we just want to take this slow and kind of find out what the issues are and readdress that particular criteria. Not to say the screens should be of any less quality or cost or any of those sorts of things, but do we require a therapy? So if you're interested in that, let me know. It's something I'm trying to put together maybe over 6 or 9 months.
I'm Natasha Bonham with Genetic Alliance. So the Secretary's Advisory Committee was established in 2003, as I said, and is responsible for advising the Secretary of HHS on a number of issues related to newborn screening. Now, sometimes there are discussions that are discussed that are outside of newborn screening, because not every condition that impacts a newborn or a child will fit into that program, but a great deal of it, thank you, is based on newborn screening. There are 15 voting members, and that includes 10 special government employees and also representatives from a number of the federal agencies. Then there are 12 organizational representatives. Genetic Alliance is one, March of Dimes is one, the Society for Inborn Errors in Metabolism, I think that's their name, is one. We do not get to vote, and the discussion always starts with the voting members, and then the organizational representatives are able to chime in if there is time. There is a parent representative on that 15-member voting group. There's always been one, and the current person is Andrea Williams, and her child has sickle cell disease. So as it was noted, the Discretionary Advisory Committee was chartered in April of 2013. Now, because the funding ran out and there are the issues with the reauthorization, they had to end one type of committee and start this Discretionary Committee. And it is basically an extension for 2 years. Now, with all the great news that Emil has spoken about, I don't think we will run out of time, but again, it's another reason why it's very important to keep this issue on the radar of our Congress people. For all official business, it can be found at their website, which is listed above. There are 3 subcommittees, one on education and training, and that's for consumers, the public, as well as health professionals. One on follow-up and treatment that has done a lot of work, particularly around medical foods. And then one on laboratory standards and procedures. That's the group where, you know, how do we bring on a new test, a new condition at the state level? Those discussions are had. At different times, there are working groups. Currently, there's a working group on sickle cell disease and screening for trait and athletes. This is because recently the NCAA has made a rule that all new athletes need to be screened or submit their status for sickle cell and sickle cell trait, which we think is an interesting precedence to set, and we really want to be able to dive in on that and say, what are they really getting out of this? How do we make sure that all efforts are in place to protect these athletes and these student athletes, not necessarily to discriminate against them? So we talked a little bit already about the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel, also known as the RUSP. It is the federal recommended panel of conditions, emphasis on recommended. This committee cannot tell a state, you must screen for this, you must screen for that. Now, there are some states that have in their laws that they will screen for anything that this federal committee puts on their list, but that is not the case across the board. Currently, there are 31 conditions, including CCHD, which I'll speak a little bit more about. But for a condition to be part of the RUSP, it has to be nominated. It has to go through a nomination process. Someone from the public, from outside of the committee, has to submit a letter. The committee really encourages for people who are interested in nominating a condition to be added to the RUSP, a multidisciplinary team. And that means having researchers and clinicians who have expertise on the condition, advocacy and/or professional organizations who really know what is the lived experience of this condition, as well as interested consumers and individuals. They really are looking for a team effort. Requirements for consideration include having a valid laboratory test. That is a must. Also, widely available confirmatory testing. You need to be able to not just say, maybe this person has this condition, but definitely have that confirmation at the end of the process. It is also really important to be able to have a population-based pilot test. And I will say, and as I said, I'm not speaking as an official member of the committee, but as someone who has been to the meetings for the past 7 years, it's really important to have a pilot test, particularly either at the state level or with a population that resembles the population in the US. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but these are all the different steps and things to consider when you're nominating a condition. As you can see, there are a lot of steps, but there's a nomination form, and then there's an administrative review to make sure all the information is included, including letters of support, evidence for testing. And then there is a nomination and prioritization working group, which is a group of people from that original advisory committee. They present to the committee at large and say, here's the evidence that's produced. Should this move to the next step? There is a vote. If the vote is no, feedback is given to the nominators. If the vote is yes, then it goes on to a condition review working group. That working group works for months and months doing interviews with experts, including family members, gathers all the evidence that they can find and presents it to the committee. Oftentimes, the committee comes back with more questions. That condition review group goes back, does more investigation, and then represents to the committee. Then the committee votes, and then if the committee votes yes, then it goes up to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. That is the person who actually has the final say on if something is added to the recommended uniform screening panel. So just very quickly, these are the conditions that have been added to the RUSP since that initial study that was done, or the initial work that was done with the American College of Medical Genetics and the Health Resources Services Administration. So we have SCID and CCCHD. Pompeii was voted yes. The committee voted yes, it should be added. And now we are waiting to hear back from the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And then currently MPS 1 is under investigation, so in that evidence review process. So now quickly to talk about Baby's First Test, which is one of the programs that is funded through the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act. Just quickly, so all the sections of this pie chart that are not green show the percentage of recent mothers who said they had no idea about newborn screening, they were not given enough information, or they don't remember. So that means majority of people don't realize that their children are getting screened at birth, even though all 4 million babies that are born in the US get screening. So Baby's First Test is the nation's newborn screening clearinghouse. If you look for that exact language in the bills that Dean spoke about, that is how you will find it. And our mandate is really to inform and empower families and healthcare providers throughout the newborn screening experience. So from before the baby is here to all the way through if there's a diagnosis to be had. We have information on all 50 states, DC, as well as all the territories in terms of what they screen for, who is the contact person at that state, what is their process, how much do they charge for newborn screening, really all of that program information. We also have very detailed information on all the conditions that are screened for, including what does the course of treatment look like, really a range of information that we actually send out to the advocacy organizations so that we make sure that our information on our site is up to date. And we know that it's the advocates who are dealing with these conditions day in and day out who are the true experts. Later we're in February, so early March, we will be releasing our Spanish site, which you can see up there. Looks the same, but in Spanish. Ways that we engage the community. We have our challenge awards, and they are really meant to support newborn screening efforts at the local level. We have given these to universities, advocacy organizations, states, again, really getting the word out about newborn screening, and also the fact that though it's a great program, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. We also have our newborn screening consumer task force. To date, we have had representation from 17 states and as well as DC. This is a year-long training program where we train consumers and individuals about newborn screening at the state and federal level. And then we also encourage them to become really active in their communities around newborn screening. We have also had them present and give public comments to the Secretary's Advisory Committee. And we have actually given them full reign to do that. So they are not giving out talking points from Genetic Alliance at all. It is completely what that group is passionate about and has really wanted to talk about. And just to close out, we do a number of campaigns. This past year, our campaign has been Be Bold, Wear Gold. You may see some people have these gold pins. It's to celebrate 50 years of newborn screening and the fact that it's great that we've reached this milestone, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need to keep going on with it. You can find us on social media, of course, and this is just a quick preview of what our new site, which will launch in the spring, will look like, really taking into fact that people really are looking for condition information and what their states are screening for. Just to give you a little preview. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. Anna's going to give us some additional perspective from the advocacy side of things.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I work for the Hunter's Hope Foundation. And I'm very excited to be here. I think Julia probably knew that I love public speaking, and that's why she invited me. Just kidding, that's sarcasm. I'm going to give just a brief overview of our advocacy efforts through Hunter's Hope, and I'll be focusing more on our state initiatives and the family advocate perspective. Did it change? Okay, it didn't here. Okay. Hunter's Hope was founded in 1997 by NFL Hall of Fame quarterback Jim Kelly and his wife Jill when their son Hunter was diagnosed with Krabbe leukodystrophy. And Krabbe is a rare inherited disorder that affects the nervous system. Children like Hunter, who have the early infantile form of the disease, suffer greatly as they rapidly lose virtually all voluntary movement, and they typically don't live beyond their second birthday. So when Hunter's Hope was created, it was with a mission to broaden public awareness of Krabbe and other leukodystrophies, fund research to find improved treatments and a cure, and then provide support and hope and information to families dealing with these devastating diseases. So a few years after Hunter's Hope began, a treatment for Krabbe through cord blood transplantation became available. However, it was found to only be beneficial when administered before a child was symptomatic, since there's no way to reverse the effects of the disease. So because of this, initially, this treatment was only available to families with a known family history of the disease, meaning typically that they'd already lost a child to Krabbe. And in the picture above, you see two sisters, both affected by Krabbe. Regan is the oldest of the two, and unfortunately, she was not diagnosed in time to receive treatment and passed away just after her first birthday. However, her younger sister, Zoe, when she was born, her parents knew to have her tested for the disease, and Zoe was transplanted shortly after birth, and as you can see in this photo, she is now a vibrant and typical third grader. It wasn't until newborn screening for Krabbe became available that there was hope for all future children to have access to this potentially life-saving treatment and a chance at life. So once the foundation became aware of the need for expanded newborn screening nationwide, not only for Krabbe, but for all treatable diseases, education and advocacy for newborn screening became a priority of the foundation. And then in 2006, New York became the first state to include Krabbe in its newborn screening panel. For the past decade, Hunter's Hope has been actively involved in many of the federal newborn screening committees, programs, and initiatives that Emil and Natasha did such a great job explaining. And while we value these, we also feel that pursuing newborn screening for Krabbe and similar disorders state by state is of equal importance, as it is the only way to give these children a chance at life. So as we're a small foundation, we don't have people in every state like the March of Dimes does, but maybe in 75 years we will. But for now, because we are a relatively small foundation, we really depend on our families and their to lead these legislative efforts in their state. And as a foundation, we work to just come alongside them and help them every step of the way. And just quickly, on a personal note, I did want to share how I became aware of newborn screening and rare disease. As a mother of two healthy children, like Natasha mentioned, I didn't know anything about newborn screening other than my kids had a little Band-Aid on their heel after they were born. And it wasn't until a few years ago when my dear friend's daughter, Karis, was diagnosed with Krabbe that I learned about the importance of newborn screening. And when she was diagnosed at 5 months old, and they were told it was too late for treatment because she was already symptomatic, and I learned that there were states that if Karis had been born there, she could have received this treatment at birth, I was immediately moved to action. And so it's that passion, together with my background in primarily education and just a little bit of legislation, that really guides me today in what I do for the foundation. So, like I said, we really rely on our families, and as I go throughout these slides, I'll try to share pictures and stories of families who are currently working in their state to make a difference. And when a parent learns that their child has Krabbe and it's too late for treatment, I mean, that alone is indescribably devastating. But when they learn that their child was born in the wrong state, and if they had been born in a state that did screen for Krabbe, they could have received this treatment, it's almost unbearable. So, like I said, when they find out that if their child was born in the wrong state, they want to make sure that no other child has to suffer the way that theirs has. Yet the thought of initiating legislative change in their state can be somewhat intimidating. But the truth is that an affected family's most powerful tool is their story. Their story is what inspires others to join their efforts, whether they're telling friends and family or the governor. It has that same impact that motivates people to action. It's their story, so they're the experts. And we encourage families to make sure that they include details like the first symptoms, their diagnostic journey, and the difference that early detection and treatment through newborn screening could have made in their child's life. So, keeping the perspective that advocating for legislative change in your state is simply, it's just telling your story, I think that it makes it, it simplifies the process and makes it seem a lot more doable. But of course, family advocates do have to take certain steps to make their voice heard. Legislation can be a long process, so we feel like it's important to just focus on that next step. Step 1, who is my legislator? Step 2, request a meeting. And I think that when our families really focus on using their time with their legislator to share their story, that's really what brings about the most change and impact. And so we encourage them to bring pictures, to bring their child if that's possible, and then to be direct and to the point and using their time wisely, because you don't really know how much time you're going to have with them. And also before the meeting closes, I feel like it's really important before you leave, that you know what the next steps are. Are you going to sponsor this legislation? If so, when can I expect to hear from you? Who's my contact person? All of these things are good so that you know what to expect moving forward and how you can continue to work with your legislator as the bill is written. And it's our experience that the vast majority of the time, legislators want to help, but if for some reason your state representative isn't interested, meet with your state senator, meet with your mother's state representative. We really encourage our families to just keep moving forward until they get the end result that they hope for. This is my favorite picture ever, because as you can see, it's a good day for this family. This is Bob and Elisa, who are celebrating the passage of Aiden's Law, which is a bill named for their son. And so as you can tell, it was a good day, and it's a good example of hard work paying off. So in many respects, securing a sponsor and getting a bill drafted and introduced is the easy part. Once this is done, it's important to continue to rally support, though, within the state with other affected families. And again, just sharing your story over and over again, whether it's through social media with your community at large, so that people can come on board because they really want to help. And one practical way that they can do that, and a tool that we really have found very useful through Hunter's Hope, is that we set up action alerts for each individual bill on the Hunter's Hope website. So that way, residents in a particular state can very easily, within a few minutes, contact their representatives and let them know, we want you to support this bill. And also, we just want to remind families that every state is different and every situation around a bill is different. So sometimes it can take several legislative sessions for a bill to finally pass, but every step is progress because you're raising more awareness and more people know about what you're doing and why. So we really don't consider anything a failure. It's all progress, and it's all moving in the right direction. And as passionate as a legislator may be about a bill, they're not going to be as passionate as you are. And so that's why we really encourage our families to stay persistent, and persistent contact, or in contact, be persistent, but we encourage like a polite persistence rather than an obnoxious persistence, because you do want to develop relationships, long-term relationships, so that you can continue to work together with your legislator. And I know it might sound simple that I keep saying focus on your story, but I did want to just really quickly share some examples of the impact that a story and these children have on legislators. A New Jersey legislator who worked with Emma's grandmother to get a law passed in New Jersey says that he considers Emma's Law the single most important piece of legislation he's ever worked on, and he's committed to helping in other states as well. And then recently I received a letter from a state senator in Maryland, and I'll just read what he says quickly. He says, "A beautiful little girl named Lily, whose infectious laugh warms the heart and smile touches whoever comes in contact with her, inspired me to sponsor this legislation. This bill is designed to help the newborn live a full and joyous life." So don't ever underestimate the impact that your story has on whoever you're sharing with, including politicians. And then finally, just to briefly say that at Hunters Hope, we do play a supporting role. And some of the ways that we help our families is we work with disease experts to make sure that our families have the most current informational, like fact sheets to give legislators when they go to meetings. And then we also can provide sample legislation when a legislator is drafting a bill. And then again, we just try to encourage our families to continue to persevere until they finally get the results they want. So in closing, I do just want to say that for me, it's a true privilege to walk alongside families who choose to use their greatest tragedy they turn it into something amazing that saves lives. And this little boy with the glasses is Elmer, and he's the first child who was diagnosed and treated through the newborn screening program in New York for Krabbe, and this is his first day of kindergarten. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. So I want to step aside and say there's two little teaching moments I noticed here. First off, obviously we can resonate with an advocate, right? Because we're all there and in those shoes. But one of the things that you did in the middle of your talk was you stopped for 2 minutes or a minute and you told your story. And I was watching all of you, and of course we resonate. But remember that the people that you're meeting with tomorrow or back in your state, they're humans too, and they will connect. And it is, and you hear people say this from this platform all the time, it's about your story. But it is your story that counts. The other thing that you did early on, and I encourage you to do this tomorrow, is it was my story and very quickly kind of moved into, in this case, it was an update of what they did. Tomorrow it's going to be an ask or a little bit more information. But once again, everybody here was engaged because of the story. So now we're talking to a person. And with all respect to the ACA conversation we had an hour ago and all the grumbling about the people 3 or 4 blocks from here, they're all people. The legislative aides are people. They got busy schedules. They're worried about the snow and all the deadlines and all that stuff, just like you are. But we connect personally, and so that's really, really important. So sorry to kind of take us off of newborn screening, but that's really the connection and part of the learning from here.